Hello, welcome everybody to this parallel session on assessment in times of crisis. And we now have a presentation from Isora Enriquez O'Farrell on assessing undergraduate English teacher trainees in times of pandemic. This is an experience from Cuba. Professor Osura is from the University of Pedagogical Sciences in Havana, is an ELT consultant to the Ministry of Education with expertise in English language teaching and teacher education.
Havana. My name is Isora Enriquez O'Farrell from Enrique José Barona University of Pedagogical Sciences in Havana. I would like first to thank the organizers of New Directions for the possibility of presenting our experience in assessing undergraduate English teacher trainees in pandemic times, and also the British Council in Havana for its support. I will give a brief overview of English language teacher education in Cuba. The program is a 4-year or 5-year program of university training. During this time, trainees take a number of academic disciplines to develop their communicative competence to a B2 level or above, according to the Common European Framework of Reference, along with their pedagogical and research skills. So the main objective is to train and guide future teachers to have successful language learners in schools. The curriculum is structured around 4 main macro fields, which draw on the Cuban pedagogical tradition in teacher education. The academic component covers the subject matters. The practical component is linked to the teaching practicum. The research component helps to develop research skills. The university extension component is aimed at engaging students in social, community, cultural, and sports activities. And a very important evidence has been given during pandemic times, in which the young Cuban ELT community has had a great response through community and social work. The assessment scheme covers formative and summative tasks, and it has an end of program assessment in which undergraduates demonstrate their communicative, pedagogical, and research skills through a comprehensive assessment task with a strong practical component based on the practicum at school. So some students present a system of lessons from a selected unit of the K-12 syllabus, and those students who have had very good results during their academic years and also in research, they present small-scale research in a diploma paper to solve a teaching learning problem identified during practicum. But in March 2020, we had a new education landscape due to the outbreak of coronavirus. All schools were closed, so there was a sudden change from face-to-face delivery to distance or online education through digital platforms. However, we had 2 main challenges to face: connectivity issues and the availability of technological resources, both in educational institutions and at homes. So this presentation outlines the steps taken to approach teaching and assessment in the English language teacher education program in Cuba in pandemic times. In the new changed educational landscape, we all started to learn to do things differently. So in response to that, the National Board of the English Language Education Program that I coordinate created a WhatsApp group with the representatives of the National Board in the different universities to analyze what we could do. The guiding questions were: What are the essential contents? What are the essential contents for determining these contents? Or let's say, what are the fundamentals for determining these contents? Based on the essential contents, what form should assessment take? What can each university do for end-of-program assessment? We have come up with these answers. In terms of essential contents, we think that we should cover those that are strongly linked to the professional performance of the language teacher to foster students' learning. So we should assess the language content or the students' skills to use the language content linked to the K-12 syllabus. Students should demonstrate the language pedagogy needed to help students learn the content. Students should also show their strengths, their skills, to use the most appropriate psychological tools to help their learners cope as successfully as possible in such challenging and stressful conditions. Another step has been to examine the existing assessment tasks so as to have only those that have clear purposes in keeping with the present needs and those which would fit into the new distance landscape. It is important to explore the technological accessibility and availability for educators and trainees to engage regularly in distance learning. It has been very important to decide what information is needed to support educators and trainees in the new situations. Obviously, deciding on assessment criteria has been very important. Providing trainees and their families with a clear explanation on how assessment is going to be or was going to be developed. And it was very important to design a variety of strategies to provide support or tutoring trainees and incorporate constructive feedback, practice time, and remediation when needed. So the assessment tasks should have the following characteristics. They should be strongly linked to teaching practicum context, so they should be very practical. They should be centered on the trainees so as to guide them, motivate them, and help them to achieve the learning outcomes during their regular consultancy sessions. The tasks should be designed in a very comprehensive way so that several learning outcomes and assessment criteria can be covered in one task. The two main tasks that we decided to as end of program tasks were the diploma paper and a detailed lesson plan and its fundamentals. In some places, the students presented a system of lessons, but in most cases, it was a detailed lesson plan. We also had to think of different alternatives so that learners could present their final work, either through videotaping or voice recording or using telephoning or via email or using text messages or in WhatsApp or Telegram groups or face-to-face. It happened that videotaping and WhatsApp, interacting in WhatsApp or Telegram groups and face-to-face were the most commonly used. The trainees had to show that they were able to design and substantiate a teaching proposal or small-scale research project to teach a given content communicatively. Those who developed the diploma paper had to design and substantiate that research project to present a solution for a teaching learning problem. All of them should show skills for communicating the proposal with accuracy and fluency using the academic language required, and they all needed to show that they were able to answer questions asked by the examiners with accuracy and fluency. The assessment criteria should show evidence that the grades are based on the fulfillment of the teacher education program outcomes, that the trainee's performance clearly shows that what has been presented is the result of his or her own work, that responses are complete and cover all aspects of the task, and that all trainees receive a similar mark according to the standards. The graduation assessment cycle started by deciding on the most appropriate assessment task and the form it needed to take according to the health conditions and the availability of resources in the university. Once that was decided, the trainees were informed about it and the preparation and training process started. This training process was facilitated by mentors using mostly WhatsApp and Telegram groups in their mobiles. However, some trainees who lived in remote areas or those who did not have the appropriate equipment had to use other resources like texting messages, telephoning, emailing. In the places, in the communities where that was possible, face-to-face sessions were organized, of course, following the health measures that the situation requires. Obviously, some trainees had to be transferred for later when the health conditions were better. In the consultancy sessions, trainees gradually presented the progress of their work. They received feedback from the mentors and from the other trainees who could join the online sessions. There was a combination of asynchronous and synchronic chats, and this helped trainees and mentors to follow the chat because they could join in at different times. They could follow the reflections, they could leave comments. The sessions try to be as collaborative as possible so as to practice, rehearse, give and receive feedback, ask and answer questions because the students needed this practice for their final presentation. On the date scheduled, trainees sent their pre-recorded presentations. It was received by the examining board, and a main reader was appointed among the members, and this reader sent the examinee some questions to be answered on the date of that has been scheduled for interaction. On the date scheduled for interaction, the trainee answered the questions previously asked, and the rest of the board might also ask one or two questions. That same day, the examinee were given the final grade that has taken into account the final product and the presentation or the preparation process according to the report rendered by mentors. I need to say that during pandemic times, we have done more formative assessment than usual, and we have also emphasized the affective component of assessment. As lessons learned from teaching and assessment in pandemic times, we can say that we need to go over our rubrics so as to write them in a clearer way, as well as tasks and task orders and instructions. We need to give priority to process over the product so that more scaffolded tasks are allowed, so that they would be working on one task over several weeks instead of just submitting a different task each time. That we need to use more personalized tasks, and we need to use portfolios and journals more systematically. It is very important for us to incorporate assessment for learning more coherently into our process. And coming to the end, we must say that the Cuban pedagogy has a humanistic and inclusive approach that advocates for social justice. Developmental pedagogy is the learning theory that underpins teaching, learning, and assessment in Cuba. So the priority is to reduce students' level of anxiety that has been increased by the pandemic and its consequences in health. That the pandemic has demonstrated the best of the humankind, because we have had to reinvent our routines to create positive, supported, and collaborative learning and assessing environments towards success, giving priority to the affective domain of the teaching learning process. So families, stakeholders, mentors, everyone has been engaged in offering this affective component to teaching, learning, and assessment in pandemic times. And it's something that shouldn't stop with the pandemic. It's something that should be given priority in the future. This is another lesson learned from pandemic times. I want to thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much there to Professor Isaura Enriquez O'Farrill. Fascinating insight on the challenges and obstacles around assessing teacher trainees in times of pandemic. At this point, I'd like to invite you to post any questions you may have on the chat. We have a comment from Carlos Franco, who says, "What a careful and detailed piloting plan. The most important issue is the focus on feedback. Thanks for sharing such a great research study. Big congratulations. Such a pleasure to be graduated from the Higher Educational Institute in Havana, Cuba." Any more questions or comments? So, a comment from Isaura says, "Thank you for your comments. Isaura's having some connectivity issues. And I'm sure if she's not unable to provide feedback online, she'll be able to do so by email or other. So please, as I say, post your comments and we will try and get back to you if she's unable to speak. Okay, so I don't think we have any more comments or observations. So I will say thank you to Isaura again for her presentation and leave you to join the next part of the program. Thank you very much.